So last night, my team and I wrapped up the election campaign with a public town hall event at the Lions Event Center, and I wanted to put a recorded version online for everybody to view, for those of you who weren't able to make it. And I was going to do that this morning, but the reality is I went back to what we had recorded, and the honest to God truth is, well, the audio quality was pretty terrible. We had some issues with the mic, there's a lot of feedback, and so I said, you know what, let's just re-record the whole thing today. So that's what I'm going to do. And the event last night I thought went pretty well. We had close to 100 people in attendance. I gave a speech. We did live Q&A. People grilled me on a number of issues, and there was a bunch of council candidates in attendance who participated. So thanks everybody who made it, and for those of you who weren't able to tune in, I hope you can get a glimpse of what we discussed here with this video. So I kicked off the event last night, informing the whole group that I might have told them a little lie. In the initial invitation that I sent out about the event, I said Morgan is going to be giving a brief speech and then headed into questions and answers thereafter. What I ended up giving was not brief at all. But I initially did have a short speech planned, but as things turned out, I just had a lot to say. The night before the town hall, we had the debate at the Alliance Church between all the candidates, and things got, I would say, a little tense between the existing mayor and myself. And on one hand, he was saying, you know, everything is good in Cochrane, the budget's fine, there's nothing to worry about with growth and finances. On the other hand, I was painting a very different picture, and I was saying, well, actually, there's a lot to worry about with growth. There's a lot of financial challenges with our debt limit looming and stuff like that. And then you had the wild card of like Councillor Wilson standing up and saying that the town was on a path to bankruptcy and insolvency. So after the event, I had a bunch of people coming up to me saying, you know, Morgan, admittedly, I don't really know who to believe here, because both you and Jeff are saying totally opposite things, and you both seem pretty convicted in what you're saying. So I went home that night and I just thought of all the stuff that I wanted to share with the community. And I couldn't sleep that night. I was tossing and turning the entire evening. My wife kicked me out of bed, said, I gotta sleep, I gotta work in the morning, you go down there, you go sleep on the couch. So I slept on the couch. I was up all night thinking about it, and when I woke up in the morning yesterday, first thing, I'm like, as soon as my eyes opened, I was thinking about the speech. I couldn't get it out of my head. I felt like I was essentially dreaming about the speech. So I got to work on these slides, put together a whole new presentation, and here it is. As I've got a lot to say. And you know, it's going to be long, but I think you might find it engaging, informing, and perhaps a little entertaining. I hope you view this as the opportunity to watch something that is, you know, about the length of a Netflix episode, and I hope you get something positive out of it. So, I want to start off with why. Why do I believe it's a time for change, but more importantly, why am I running for mayor in the first place? And it is all about this. It is this place that I absolutely love, and this is what drives me. And I really realized how much I love this place actually by leaving it. After grade 12, so I grew up in Cochrane, went to high school here. After grade 12, I went to Brazil for a year. That was about 15 years ago. And when I left, I thought I'm going to leave our little town behind, never come back, and go see the big world. But when I went away to another country, I had a great time in Brazil. But what I found was the biggest thing that I learned throughout the whole experience was just how much I love Canada and how good we have it in Alberta, in Cochrane, and how much I love this place and how much I love being around my family. And so when I came home from that year abroad, I immediately told all my family and friends, you know, like I decided something when I was gone, and that is I'm probably never leaving this area. So I went off to post-secondary education. There was a number of schools I had in mind, but I chose University of Calgary to stay local with my friends, and I studied economics there. And I right away got into my passion for politics. I wanted to fight for the future of this place. So studied economics, from there, I got into working in federal politics. I ran for council, got elected 12 years ago, and then I went on and took on various provincial roles, and then I moved on into the private sector. But it really all has just been driven by my love for our community and a desire to protect it. And I know that my love for Cochrane is not unique. We are lucky to live in a place that people choose to live. I have a number of people that I know in my life that have just chosen to move here. They had no friends or family or job connection. They just came through Cochrane, and they're like, this is the place that I want to be. And while I live on council, or sorry, while I've served on council, I have had the opportunity to hear from so many people who tell their story about Cochrane. And I can't tell you how often that story begins by people talking about this view. It's that view when you're coming down the hill and you just hit Glen Eagles and you look out into the valley of this beautiful gem in the world that we get to call our homes. And I know it's true for almost everyone that that's what they love about it. And so another thing that really drives me, another moment in my life, is this time my wife and I went on a trip to New York City, and this is an overhead view of New York. Very cool city to see. I could never live there, but when my wife and I were coming home, I sat in the window seat in the airplane, and we had just seen a lot that the city had to offer. But as we took off into the sky and went up to 10, 15, 20,000 feet, I looked out the window and I just saw a sea of concrete. And if you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. It's like as far as my eye could see, onto the curvature of the earth was nothing but buildings and houses. And as I looked at it, I had this sick feeling in my stomach because I just know like Cochrane's growing so quickly, Calgary's growing so quickly. And I had this feeling like I never want that to happen where we live. But granted, New York's much further down the line than we are in development. But I feel like if we're not careful, someday in the future, be it 2050, 2075, 2100, I don't know. But that could happen here if municipal governments aren't careful. And it is the municipal governments who need to take the lead on zoning for the future to make sure that we have what we have is beautiful and protected. And so I worry that if we aren't careful in planning for the future of Cochrane in this region, that right now, while Cochrane is a place that people move to, in the worst case scenario, Cochrane's just going to become a place that you commute from. And you've seen a lot of this happen out in Vancouver and Toronto, where a lot of the peripheral communities out in the suburbs are really just places that people who wish they could live in the city have to live in these suburbs, and then they have to commute in and out of the city for work every single day. And some of the people, they have to commute 2 hours in both directions. They're sitting in traffic and transit to get in and out of their job, and it ends up being 4 hours a day for some people. Every single day, it's 20 hours a week. Like that commute can ruin your life. Think what else you could do with 20 hours a week. And I believe that Cochrane is at a critical point in our history in ensuring that this doesn't happen here. One of the things that has been holding back Cochrane's development pressure, I mean, it hasn't been held back a lot, but one of the regulators on the pressure has been that we haven't had enough water rights for more growth in our region. And if you're following council closely, you may realize that in just the most recent months of this past term, we did officially lock in water rights for up to 100,000 people living in the Cochrane area. And that means that we have a lot of opportunity to grow properly, but we also have a very major challenge ahead of us to make sure we do it smartly. But on top of what's happening in Cochrane, if you look down south of our municipal border, out in Rocky View County and towards Calgary, there's a major Costco being built right on our doorstep. And if you've lived in Cochrane long enough to remember when the Walmart opened, there was this period in Cochrane's history where things were kind of growing along slowly, and then all of a sudden the Walmart opened. And after the Walmart opened, it became this like economic growth hub, and like everything just exploded around the Walmart. And you can see regions in Calgary where the Costco's really pull everybody in, but then outside the Costco, there's like everything else. And so I do worry that once this major Costco gets built on our doorstep, there's going to be this explosion of development activity around that area, right on our doorstep. Well, we've got 100,000 water licenses for up to 100,000 people, and if we're not careful, like I do believe we are very close to the juncture in our history where Cochrane does just become this sea of concrete, and I don't want that to happen. And the thing is, I want to dial back in the history of our current council, because we have actually had very similar conversations about not wanting this to happen. I wanted to share with you guys this map. So the whole group on council has been together for 2 full terms, same mayor, exact same council. And back in 2019, before the last election, we got together and we talked about this very issue that I am talking about here. And we laid out this map. We released it to the public, and we set a vision. The vision was that there's development happening all around us that we're aware of, and these green areas are areas we want to make sure are protected. We want to work with our regional partners and work with our, inside our own boundaries to make sure these green areas are protected forever. And on top of that, we wanted to look at expanding our borders. And the reason we would want to do that, something I've spoken about a lot in the election, is that one of the ways we can make sure that Cochrane doesn't just become a sea of houses is to take control of the lands on our borders. But then we should have lower density housing that transitions into country residential. So a lot of the nice stuff you see out in Rocky View County that creates that buffer. So it's not just city all the way across. You have to have that lower density, single detached homes transitioning into country residential and country estates. And then what we would also do to counteract that is drive density towards the core of Cochrane. Another thing that I've spoken about. So to have those options that provide an affordable starter option, whether it's a duplex, a townhome, or a condo or an apartment, that should be driven downtown. Another piece of what I want to drive in there is commercial activity. But this concept of lower density on the outskirts, higher density in the middle is something we started referring to as a density gradient. And we actually talked about creating something we would maybe call an innovation district downtown, and estate lots out on the on the outside of the community. But intentions are what they are. We did end up getting a little distracted. And if you look at the date here, November 15th, 2019, do you guys remember what happened just a few months later when the year turned 2020? Well, the whole world kind of got turned up on its head, and we kind of lost sight of our strategic priorities. The point is, though, there was a couple years there where I would say that I don't fault anybody for the fact that we kind of lost sight of pursuing that larger goal. But then shortly after, we all got reelected, and when we got reelected, we looked back at the whole thing had kind of blown over from 2020. And we looked at what we wanted to do, and we said, "Hey, let's redial back into our main priorities." But before we could do that, our administration had to have a chat with us. They said, "Look, Cochrane is among the fastest growing towns in all of Alberta. You guys know, actually among all of Canada. You guys know this. But at the same time, we were also at this time the lowest funded operating government, had the lowest operating funding in the government on a per capita basis. So we have this challenge where Cochrane has, because we're growing so quickly, we have some of the most pressing issues to deal with, while simultaneously our municipal government has some of the fewest resources to deal with it." And they said, "Look, you got big ambitions for this region. That's great. We need the tools to take action." And I myself had always been a very big fiscal conservative, so I typically would never embrace where they were going with this. But they said, "You want to do this stuff? Give us a tax increase." And I plugged my nose and I supported this. And I went and tried to explain to the community, myself, as did a number of other of my colleagues, say, "Look, we got big things. Just trust us. Taxes are going to go up." And I trusted the process. Because of my motivations that I just explained at the beginning of this presentation, what I dream about for our future is going to require work. And so I trusted the process and I embraced this tax increase. And I think this is an important point for me to touch on in this presentation or video, because I want everybody to know that I am not just a Mr. No, Mr. Opposition who's always found places to complain and criticize. I have tried supporting the current administration and current team. And from there, we went and we started, pulled up our sleeves and started doing the strategic planning process. And very shortly after, we adopted the strategic plan that first we adopted the framework for the strategic plan of what exactly we would be doing and how we would move forwards. But after a year and that tax increase, this was pretty much all we had. We produced this document with 5 pages of fluff. And I was one of the people. There was a number of counselors, maybe even the mayor himself. I can't remember exactly what he had to say, but we had a conversation, and we're like, this is not really enough. We have big ambitions. It's been 1 year. This isn't enough progress for 1 year. And our administration said, "Don't worry, it's coming. We just had to set the framework. The policies are coming. We're going to put teeth to this. Just wait." So I trusted the process even further. But then, as time went on, I slowly started to feel more and more that trusting that process and supporting that tax increase was a mistake. The major red flag, when I really started to ask some serious questions, was when it was in 2023, when our town could not properly pass an audit on our massive budget. It turns out that we were very much falling behind on our financial planning, and this big budget that we had increased, or the big tax increase, was not being, we couldn't even validate exactly or verify exactly where it was all being spent. But there was a number of other things that I was concerned about. There were expense scandals. I'm talking about trips to Las Vegas and an inappropriate amount of eating out and stuff like that. But what bothered me wasn't just about the existence of those scandals. It was that I had gone out there and asked the public to trust me that we're using your tax dollars appropriately, and then these scandals come up, and there was no admission of guilt or apology. It was always just, well, that's what we've done, so deal with it. There was no personal accountability, even in private personal conversations. And then we opened up the Cochrane Station, that innovation building, which now is referred to as a transit hub, but it was supposed to be an innovation building, and we had been preparing for this for 4 years. And somehow, when we cut the ribbon on it, the innovation programming was not even done. Council was informed the week that we cut the ribbon on, oh, by the way, that executive director, which you approved a budget for, hasn't been hired yet, and there's no programming in place. And it just kind of got swept under the rug. There was no accountability. And then I don't know if you guys recall, but there was that traffic, that summer, there was like a traffic nightmare when we first kicked off construction. What had happened is there was a number of projects that all started at the exact same time, and effectively there was only like one way in and out of downtown Cochrane. And again, there was just like, there was no real consequences or plan to deal with it. It just felt like we were out of control. And then there was the water line break where Cochrane lost access to water, and the public still hasn't heard the full story, and there's still questions out there about what happened. And then there was the investigation of Councillor Fedeko, which I think we could have and should have handled differently. And then our transit discussions lagged on way longer than they needed to. At one point, we had a report that told me that told council that, you know, our transit system's doing great because we now have an average ridership of 2 people per ride. And I was like, you know, having 2 people on a bus is not a great transit system. I would say that's the absolute bare minimum. I'd say 10 or 20 people is a great transit system. But this got dragged out. But I don't need to belabor everything, but that innovation district I mentioned, we went to a tour to plan an innovation district. No policy ever came forward. The density gradient concept that we had discussed, and all of council was on board for, never came forwards. This thing called the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan, which I'm going to come back to in this presentation, is a very important document. There was just no engagement on that. And the Cochrane Lions agreement, which I've spoken to a number of times in this election, a majority of council said, no, not majority, 100% of council said they wanted to move forwards with extending the Cochrane Lions lease. But here we are, the term has ended, and it never happened. Something that was voted to be moved forwards never came back. And there's no limit, there's no solution in place for our debt limit problem. It's just a conversation that is very real, and but we're just avoiding having the conversation. And it has been suggested, and it was suggested in this debate that got me so rattled earlier this week, that the problem with all this stuff is that, you know, council, if you don't like these problems, then bring forward solutions, bring forward motions. But I feel very strongly that our council has been made to feel that they're not really welcome to bring forward motions. Every time we've brought forward a motion to do anything, we're told, oh, there's not enough resources to do this. It's going to take forever. And I have some real tangible examples. Councillor Fedeko wanted to bring forward a motion for a whistleblower program for increased transparency and accountability. The response was, that's not the right priority. There's not enough resources to do that. Councillor McFadden brought forward a motion for sequential development. Years ago, she brought it forward. And the idea was to try and find a way to time our development so we're not building all these neighborhoods at the exact same time. Nothing came of that. Councillor McFadden brought forward a number of other motions about leadership stuff, and it was a similar conversation about resources. Councillor Wilson brought forward his policy about exploring backyard hens, and we were told that's going to take 500 hours of work. You've probably heard that story by now, but there is no way it was going to take 500 hours of work. What is being done is when council brings up things that aren't the administration's priority, they're always just told the only way you can do that is if you give us more resources by increasing taxes or hiring expensive consultants. And if you even look at our notice of motion process, when somebody brings a motion forwards, there's this big passive-aggressive document at the end of it. It's like, oh, here's all the stuff you've already got administration working on, so careful not to add too much onto the queue. But, you know, I do want to say I did get one thing approved this term. I got one thing approved. Someone from Bike Cochrane suggested to me that on streets where it's dangerous for cyclists because there's no bike lanes, we should allow them to bike on the crosswalks or sidewalks as long as they have a noise device, a bell. And I've actually experienced this in my own life, so I thought that was a pretty good idea. So I brought this motion forwards, and now, Cochrane, you are allowed to bike on a sidewalk if there's no bike lane present. But that motion took 2 years to come to fruition. It should have taken 2 weeks, but it took 2 years. And, you know, I was increasingly bringing my concerns about all this stuff up, and you can only do so much when people are replying and saying, I don't think there's a concern there, but I have a serious concern because I work in the private sector. This stuff would never fly in the private sector. But what really pushed me over the edge was our rec center. And that's ultimately why I decided in the first place that I needed to run for mayor. We need another rec center in Cochrane. We need to be planning for it very proactively. As part of that conversation, we decided we were going to look into options for changing our operating model at the rec center to see if there were some ways to create new efficiencies and be able to actually afford a new rec center. But this conversation went on behind closed doors for 2 years. Council and the public were given very, very few details for a long period of time. And then just this past spring, it came forwards and went public. And the expectation was that at the time that council got the details and the time that the public got the details, we were supposed to approve this whole major change to our rec center within 10 days. And council initially wasn't even given access to the legal agreement we were being asked to endorse. Instead, we were given a sales pitch job from our city manager who said, don't worry, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, the community is going to maintain control, this is in our financial best interest. But when you actually looked at the legal document, all of the alleged positives that were being sold to us were not in the legal document. They were all just like speech. But then even worse, that they didn't want to have a public hearing with the public, and we said, oh, we don't need to. It's just a few squeaky wheels making a lot of noise. But when we did fight for a public hearing and we got one, we had hundreds of people come out, and they represented every demographic in the whole community. And people had concerns because the curlers were going to lose their lounge, which is going to remove the social element from curling, and the everybody who plays ice sports, so hockey, ringette, figure skating, they were potentially going to have to share their ice with Calgary users. Our swim team was going to cease to exist, even though it's a very successful program. It was going to be replaced by a YMCA program, and there wasn't a lot of certainty for businesses in the that operate in SLS currently. And it was not just the proposal that bothered me, it was the way this came about, that we had this community altering decision come to us with almost no transparency. And then there was what I viewed to be a fairly underhanded effort to just squeak it under the rug and get it done as quickly as possible. And I said enough is enough. At that point, that's when I said I'm running for mayor, because we need to change things. But there's more to go. But I hope you're paying attention, because there's more. We're just getting into the important parts of really why I'm running. These challenges and issues that have put me over the edge to say that it's time for me to try and take a step back from my business and try and become the full-time mayor. What it really comes down to, the fundamental thesis of what I think is the problem facing Cochrane, is that we're growing at a rate that we cannot afford to keep up with. And there's more that our government should be doing to deal with the problem. It's these two things. If I could boil down my concerns to that. But circling back to the beginning of this presentation, I've been trying to make the case for this at all of the forums we've had, at the doors, on social media, and our existing mayor has been directly contradicting that and saying, no, we can't do anything about growth. We don't need to do anything about growth. There's no financial problems. The government's doing a great job. And then, like I said, people ask me, Morgan, how do I know who's telling the truth here? And the Cochrane Eagle came up to me after the forum, and they put a microphone in my face. They said, Morgan, you've been accused of fear-mongering this evening. What do you have to say about that? And I said, look, I'm not fear-mongering. We are going to hit the debt limit. That is a matter of fact. I said, but you don't even need to drill into the budgetary details to know that I have some genuine concerns. You can just use common sense and think about the problem without going into the numbers. So point number one, Cochrane's consistently among the fastest growing towns in all of Alberta and much of Canada. That means we have a lot of stuff to pay for. Point number two, the entire world has experienced major inflationary pressures. Nowhere are those inflationary pressures as prevalent as these major government infrastructure projects. Their costs have gone way up. Rising interest rates means that borrowing money to pay for those projects is more expensive than ever before. And that we used to borrow 1.2% interest rates. Those days are long behind us. And at the same time, the provincial government is giving our municipal government way less grant support than they used to. For example, when last time we upgraded SLS, the provincial government's grants paid for the vast majority of it. But that's not going to happen next time. So when you combine all four of these things, we have more to build than ever before. It's more expensive than ever before. The cost of borrowing to pay for it is higher than it has been in the past. And we're getting less help from other levels of government. Without even looking into the budget, it should be pretty obvious to anybody looking at this and saying, yeah, there's probably some serious financial pressures here. But I am going to get into the numbers. I'm not just going to ask you to trust common sense. That's why we've got all these slides. I want to show you guys what's happening, and what is being said in our community that isn't true is actually indeed true. When Councillor Wilson stood up and said, on the current trajectory, our town is heading towards a path of bankruptcy. That sounds probably a little radical, but he has a bit of a point, and I'll show you why. So this is from our official 10-year capital plan. What we have on the books currently is $812 million of capital expenses. And as a matter of fact, as I have said, this is from the Cochrane 2025 budget. As a matter of fact, we are projected to hit our municipal debt limit. And I want to take a moment here to differentiate between two things. There's a municipal debt limit, which is set by us, and a provincial debt limit, which is set by the provincial government. This one is just 80% of this one. And yes, we can increase it to get ourselves another 20%. I don't think we should, because debt is expensive and you lose money to interest. But also, I believe the original reason for the debt limit was to make sure we had a buffer in case of an emergency. For example, like a water line breaking or a traffic project going awry. We may need emergency capital. And we're on track to hit this one. But when we're going to hit this one's a little unclear, but we have control over this. We don't really have a lot of control over this other than jacking up your taxes. The way out of this one is tax increases, or begging the premier to change the legislation to allow us to go in debt. And I don't think it's in the premier's general political tendency to allow people to load up on debt. That's not really their MO. So let's not hope that that's going to happen. But anyways, this is the bar chart. Here's the graphs. Here's the table with the actual numbers. Like, it's a real thing. And so the suggestion that there is no cliff, it was said very explicitly by my opponent that I'm fear-mongering and that there is no cliff that Cochrane is facing. Well, check out this chart, because if you look at this chart, it looks to me like there might be a cliff. But if you're like me, you look at this chart. It's a little fishy, isn't it? Isn't it interesting how our finances, how our expenses just go up and up and up, and then something magical happens in 2031. We just don't have any more expenses anymore. We go from $304 million to $15 million. I think that's like a 95% reduction in the amount of capital we have to build. Great news, right? But how is that possible? Because at the same time, we're projecting like massive growth in Cochrane. Everybody knows it's coming. In one wild scenario, by the year 2050, we could have like 150,000 people here at the low growth rate. Which, by the way, like, unless we do something to change our growth, like, this isn't happening. But even at the low growth rate, we're still projecting 66,000 people, which is that's a big increase from 40,000. It's well over a 50% increase, more like 65% increase. So how is it possible? How is it possible we have like just nothing here? It's just because this is how we're going to deal with the debt limit, allegedly. Well, I'll tell you how it's possible is we just have all this infrastructure that we definitely need, but it's not planned. It's not put in here. I want to draw your attention to this. This is traffic. This is starting in the year 2030. We just got a big row of 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then in facilities we have a bunch more zeros. But our population is going to be through the roof. We don't have anything planned here. And something that's really important to understand at this point. You may be thinking, oh, it's not planned, no big deal, we can just plan it later. But the thing is, the only way we're going to be able to afford all of this stuff is if we can get development to pay for it. And the way the legal framework works is if the stuff is not planned, we cannot tax for it. We have to actually have properly costed projects in order to collect money from new growth to pay for those projects. So everything here that's not planned, that means that houses are being built that are not paying their fair share of this infrastructure. And we've got a serious financial crunch, and we need growth to be helping pay for growth. But this current plan doesn't have that included because there's so much that we haven't planned. So the reason that there isn't a cliff is because the current plan is to just not deal with the growth that's coming. So here's what's not included in this big budget that has what is approved has us hitting our municipal debt limit, and then I think probably finding some way to narrowly avoid the provincial debt limit via not building what we need. But we don't have any municipal traffic projects. Well, we have some, but we don't have nearly enough. We need more municipal traffic projects. I think we probably need to be looking at expanding Central Avenue via an overpass or an underpass so that when trains come through town, you have options. And we probably need to be looking at expanding, I think, Glenbow, which is across from the Alliance Church, is another major bottleneck. These are just some suggestions. We need to do real studies to figure out what we need to build. But the reality is, we have a bunch of projects, but it's all just happening within new growth. And we're hoping the province is going to build more highways. But we have this huge population increase coming, and we do not have a plan within our existing traffic infrastructure network, the municipal traffic, the municipal roads, to deal with this massive increase in population. And the rec center. We have been told that duplicating the existing rec center could be from 200 to 300 million. That was stated publicly in the council meetings. Now, You might be thinking maybe we don't need that, but unfortunately we really, really do. There's a lot of people who are experiencing the pressure that is now happening down at SLS. For example, the ice sports. Minor hockey has been very clear with us that minor hockey has been very clear with us that in 1 to 2 years they're going to be so full on ice that they're going to be having to turn kids away from hockey. And so what's going to happen, likely, publicly stated, what's likely going to happen is all the parents who already have their kids in hockey, their kids are going to get to keep on playing. But all the new kids who come here, or kids who haven't started hockey yet and want to get into hockey because maybe they're 12 and they got a new idea to play, they're going to have to go into a lottery system. And we're going to be turning kids away from hockey. But it's not just hockey. It's also ringette. It's also figure skating. And these exact same pressures are happening in our sports fields as well, for soccer and rugby and baseball. And the Horse Creek Sports Park that we have planned as the solution is $50+ million. But we also, in this budget, don't have any significant upgrades to our transit system. We have nothing for a senior center, nothing for a library or an arts and culture center. And there's nothing major in here for significant expansions to our parks and green spaces. And look how over capacity our major dog park is. Like the current dog park is so over capacity, it's completely destroying the riverbank. We are going to need more spaces. And so I'm going to be honest with you here. This, because I've got question mark, and I just guessed here, this is not rocket science, it's not engineering, but I'm pretty sure we have at least $500 million of missing projects. And the other thing I want to say is that the pressure being created on our facilities is not just within municipal infrastructure and facilities. This is also a problem impacting our provincial facilities. So let's talk about schools. We have been told by the school division that by 2026, we're going to have, in our elementary and middle schools, we're going to have 4 schools that are beyond capacity. 4 out of 7 of them are going to be beyond capacity. And in the high schools, both of our public high schools are way over capacity. There's a dip here because there's a renovation coming, but then it's right back at capacity in 2027. And this is really all that's been committed to. We have all these projects in mind, but the province hasn't been able to put pen to paper and really fund all of these things. There's a little bit of opportunity here, Franco Sud. That's an exciting opportunity, but really it's just these two. So to summarize it, we've got 4 middle and we've got 4 K-8 middle schools over capacity. Only one more being officially confirmed. Massive growth still coming. And in the high schools, they're both over capacity. All we have officially confirmed is an expansion for one of them. And then after the expansion is done, it's already expected to be right back at capacity. And I mean, like, I hate to say it, but when you have things like this happening in the school system, there's no wonder all the teachers are going on strike. And we've also been shown this timeline. Like, even once the ball gets rolling in more of these schools, these things don't happen overnight. It takes a long time to plan schools. And my point here is that the growth is what's driving this pressure in our community. So I come back to my fundamental thesis that Cochrane cannot afford to keep up with the current growth trajectory, and there's more that our government should be doing to deal with this problem. And I think I've made the case for both of these very clearly, just in the most recent presentation, the words that I've shared here with you. We have a real problem, and it's a financial one. But I do have solutions. That's why I'm running for mayor. I'm not just here to paint this doom and gloom scenario and say, well, that's it. I have ideas. And I am running on a platform of better government, slower growth, smarter financial planning, and more parks and green spaces. If you received my door hanger at your house, you will see that these are the points on there. And it just so happened that they perfectly line up for the speech that I decided to give here this week. So let's start with better government. The first thing we need to do to deal with this situation is put council back in the driver's seat. I've had lots of political experience and quite a bit of private sector experience in my life, and I sincerely believe that you get the best results when people are empowered to lead. And the office of the mayor and council is not just about the mayor. We need every councillor to feel like what they're doing matters and that they can represent their constituents. And I feel like I have spent my 12 years on council fighting for my voice to be heard. I don't want it to be that way. So I want to make sure that I'm kicking off this term, if I'm elected, by engaging with every single person who's elected, regardless of who they may or may not have supported in the municipal election or their political affiliation or any of that. We're going to find out what's driving them and what does success look for you and your constituents. And then we're going to figure out the tools to give them real results they can deliver to the people who supported them and real results for the whole community. So I want to determine areas of specialization because each of these people running for council, they all have their own interests. Some of them are very financially focused. Some of them are very interested in seniors. Some are very interested in transit. We'll figure it out and we'll give them an area of specialization and then invite them to participate in meetings and lead policy discussions on those things. And to do that, we need to break down the barriers between council and our administration. We have developed this culture at the ranch house over the last few years where council is explicitly told that they're not able to talk to staff except for at the highest level of management. And I have heard from members of our staff, they're told the reverse, that they are not able to talk to council. I know this to be true because I've knocked on doors and people have said, oh, I know exactly who you are, Morgan. I work at the ranch house. We've never met, but we're actually told we're not supposed to talk to council very much. And that's interesting because it doesn't have to be this way. In my previous time on council, things went very differently with council and admin. We used to have a Christmas party together. The Christmas party was just canceled. People used to get together and know each other's names on a first name basis. And I do plan on taking it upon myself, if I'm mayor, to learn the name of every single person at the ranch house, find out why they're passionate about their job, what they're excited about, and learn a bit about their family, and really get to know them on a personal basis. And part of this is we're going to give council an office at the ranch house. I find it insane that the people who are allegedly in charge of town hall don't have an office at town hall. And so we're going to give council an important office in the important part of the building where they can get together, they can have meetings with each other, myself, administration, community members and leaders. It'll be their space that they can use, and we'll use a shared office to start, and our executive assistant can figure out all the booking with them. And then I really want to share in the successes of what we achieve as a group. One of the pitfalls that I have seen from municipal mayors, and this is not necessarily a slight to our current mayor, but something I've seen from all mayors all over the place, is even though the mayor is really just one vote, often it's the mayor who goes out and takes credit for everything. And the mistake in doing that is when the mayor is the one who's seen to be doing all the good stuff, they slowly erode their own support from within council. And so I want council to be the ones who succeed. And so when we have policies or capital projects or any announcements to be made about the councilor's individual specializations, I don't want it to be me at the podium. I want it to be the councilor who's most passionate about that policy to be at the podium, giving the speech, cutting the ribbon. And then I want to change how we vote to further enforce that. I said to you that the mayor is just one vote on council, and that is the case. But currently, how it works in Cochrane is the mayor votes at the same time that all of council votes. What they do in the city of Calgary, as my understanding, is the mayor actually votes after council. And I think that's very powerful. And I'm going to ask council to amend our procedural bylaw to do that. And the reason I want to do it is when we put issues on the table, I want council to first make the decision of what they want to do. I'm going to participate in the discussion and debate, share my ideas. But I want it to be clear that 95, 99% of the time, I'm just going to be endorsing the will of council. So if there's things that I didn't think that I would necessarily wanted to support, but if a majority of council do support that, I'm going to vote afterwards. I'm going to vote to support council, and then I'm going to be the liaison between council and administration and the community as much as I can to execute on the things that council has voted into power. And I want to change the language as we go about doing that. And what I mean, this may seem like a very small and minor thing, but I think it is important. I'm going to try my best anyways to try and be, we. This is what council wants to do, and always try to be speaking on behalf of council, but that only works if I'm legitimately supporting the will of council and not my own will. And right now, actually, the whole time I've always been on council, how our voting has worked is it's like when the administration puts forward something, and then the mayor says, can I get a motion? And that motion's basically always to adopt the administrative recommendation. I'm going to change things a little bit as the chair, and I'm going to open up the conversation saying, council, what do you want to do? And set the tone that it's council that's driving things, not our administration. But this is a critical piece. It's not just because if we put the elected officials in power, we put you guys in power because we're the ones who answer to the public. And of course, we need to slow down growth to deal with this. I have spoken at this at great length throughout the campaign and through this video here today, but there's two key misconceptions that I believe we need to break down in order for us to tackle this. And first, we need to get honest with ourselves and our administration and the community that rapid growth is not good for our municipal finances. It is the largest pressure on our budget, and growth is not paying for growth. No matter how we shake out the budget, existing residents are going to be on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars worth of capital projects that we simply wouldn't need if there wasn't growth. And we need to understand that. We're not going to stop growth. We're just going to slow it to a rate that taxpayers can afford to keep up with. And the next misconception is it's often said, oh, there's nothing we can do about it. There is stuff that we can do about it. It's true that there's very little we can do about what's already been approved, but we have approvals for up to 60,000 people in Cochrane, but we have water rates for up to 100,000 people. This growth conversation is not going away, and so we need to set the policy framework right now before the growth comes to us, going back to my initial why, to ensure that we don't turn into like just a sea of houses and concrete like the greater Toronto area or like New York or any other major urban center, because we need to have a community that we're proud of. And I have a real 5-part policy approach to do this. It's not impossible. It starts with setting a sustainable growth policy. We need to get a democratically endorsed policy from council saying that they actually want to try and hold the growth to a reasonable rate. I believe it's somewhere between 2 to 3%. The exact details of that policy we'll have to figure out as a group. But the reason this is important is because the reason someone might say that we don't have any control over growth is because when a development application for land comes to council, and if they check off all the right policy boxes, then we are somewhat obligated to approve it. But what we need to do is change the policy boxes that they have to check off. That will give us the foundation to say, we can't approve this right now because of our policies. And so, but we need to back up the sustainable growth policy with detailed capital and financial plans. We need to go back to this debt limit. We need to get honest with the municipal government. We need to get honest with ourselves and plan everything out that we're really going to need and show that we legally, by the provincial debt limit, cannot afford it without exorbitant tax increases. And that what that's going to do is give us the backing for the sustainable growth policy. So we're going to be able to say, look, we have the sustainable growth policy. We have to have it because of these very detailed documents that support it. And then the how we're going to implement it is we have a tool called urban reserve zoning. You can set things into commercial, residential, industrial. Another tool is urban reserve zoning, which is a zoning that means this is for future growth. So we already have a tool in our toolbox to achieve the sustainable growth policy once it's put in place. But on top of that, there's also something called a growth management overlay that the city of Calgary used. You can Google it yourself if you want to research it. But there's some serious potential there because Calgary has already demonstrated a precedent for using policy to ensure that growth is aligned with our infrastructure needs. I want to see how we can learn from what Calgary has done and implement it here in Cochrane. And the last piece, while it's not a deal breaker, I think it's very important that we reduce density. By reducing density, I mean putting fewer homes per acre in land in our community. So there would literally just be less houses being built. They'd also end up having to be more of a premium product that sells a little slower. But that alone would slow down growth. And it also contributes to that density gradient that I referred to. Because if we're going to plan outwards, if we're transitioning into country residential, it's going to slow down growth, but also protect our unique identity at the exact same time. Now, I also want to mention that reducing density is something that would have an impact on previously approved development. When I say we've approved development for up to 60,000 people, not all of that development has had its subdivision determined yet, where we're actually parceling up all the land into different titles. And your density conversations about how big the lots are going to be happens at subdivision. And so there is actually quite a lot of previously approved development we could impact by reducing density. And of course, we can't materially alter. We can't say, well, you guys wanted to build townhomes, now we're going to make you build acreages. I'm sure we would not be able to get away with that. But marginal changes, a few meters here and there for slightly larger yards, a bit more parking, that's something we can and should be doing. So there's a real plan. And I know that it may seem like I'm going on and on about the details, but the number of times that I have heard in Cochrane, there's nothing you can do about growth, it's just simply not true. It's just simply not true. And the third piece of my solutions is smarter financial planning. We have a lot of expenses coming at us, and we need to deal with them. And so the first thing I would like to do is look for some low-hanging fruit. We have some of these items, such as a seniors or an arts center. I don't know which it would be, but we also have a need for a library, and they're not in the financial plan currently. And I know that those groups want to get a multi-million-dollar facility, and we can work towards and aspire towards that in the long term. But there isn't money to do it in the next couple of years. Like, that's just a financial reality that nobody else is admitting right now. There's no money for these things right now, without a huge tax increase anyway. So in the interim, we have some beautiful town facilities which are already owned by taxpayers, which I think we can be repurposing. To meet the needs of these groups. The Cochrane Ranch House right now has a number of fantastic event sites. There's also green space there. It's fully equipped with a kitchen. The largest use of this thing right now is private event rentals. But those private event rentals are quite often just weddings for people who aren't even from Cochrane. There's from Calgarians, people who live all over the place. I believe these municipally owned facilities should be used for community residents, the ones who pay for them to exist. And I also think if you looked at the opportunity cost, that is the cost of actually building these facilities versus the revenue we're generating for rentals. I think the finances would show, because you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of total event rentals revenue versus millions of dollars of cost to build. that it actually makes financial sense to forego that rental revenue in order to repurpose it for community uses. So we have some low-hanging fruit for some very fast results for some of these community uses. But then when we look at our budget, we've got the operational plan, we've got the capital plan. That's how the budget's broken down. From an operational standpoint, we, I think, need to go through and look at the rate that we're hiring new staff. This is something other councillors, and I'll be honest here, other councillors have been pushing for this more than myself, and they've really won me over on this. We need to put together I think, a 6-month hiring pause for the new council, and we need to do an organizational review. And by the way, if you're watching this and you work for the town of Cochrane, I'm not talking about layoffs. I want that to be crystal clear. I'm talking about the changes to an understanding of what we really need and making sure we're planning appropriately and not just hiring too liberally. And then the capital planning. We need to talk about we need to talk about that big capital plan, because that's what's pushing us over the debt limit. And the key piece of information for people to understand is that the solution to pay for our capital is to get more money from developers. But in order to get money from developers, we have to have the projects appropriately planned. Because if they're not planned, we legally cannot tax for them. The way the policy works, the offsite levy bylaw, the way the policy works is once we have a firm price estimation, then we're allowed to go and allocate a portion of that price to the development. We can't just willy-nilly say we're going to charge $5,000 here, $10,000 there per home. It doesn't work like that. They have to be planned. But as I showed you several slides ago, there's this gaping hole in our budget where we haven't planned stuff that we know we need to build, and because it's not planned, we're leaving money on the table. There are homes being built in Cochrane right now that are contributing to the need for additional traffic projects, for additional recreation, and those homes are not paying their fair share of the recreation. We're leaving millions of dollars on the table, so we need to get caught up on that. And then when it comes time to figure out what we're going to build, council needs to align their priorities. What does council think is the most important? Is it going to be recreation first? Is it going to be a library first? Senior center? I'm not going to say that I have a particular policy or item that I'm pushing on that. It's going to be a council decision. And we need to return to our annual 10-year planning process. When I first became a councillor, we used to get together and literally print out massive spreadsheets on big paper and paste them on the wall. And it was a very cumbersome activity, but we used to be able to literally go through line by line and say, in this year we know we need this project, and here's precisely where it's being funded from. It's going to be this tax, this grant, here's how much it's going to cost, and here's what we think the interest rate's going to be on the loan. And we'd go through all that every single year, but we've lost sight of that. And we need to get back to this process because we can never fall behind again. And then the last piece, more parks and green spaces on my platform. You know, it might seem like small potatoes compared to these other major pressing issues that I'm talking about, but this really is my big why. The reason that I'm running in the first place, to protect what's beautiful about Cochrane. And so locally, we can be investing in our parks. I think we're going to need to expand our dog park. We're going to be needing, there's that new piece of land we've purchased down by the dog park, which I think can have a green space component. We should have the density gradient, because enjoying our nature also starts with having nice, beautiful communities with big lawns, big park space, backyards you can enjoy with your neighbors. And then we need to be looking at future border expansion. And then that, which brings me to the regional solutions. I want to get back to this map. We need to be looking at protecting this entire region, but that's not something the municipal government can do on their own. It's not something, certainly not something the mayor could do on their own. We need to lock arms with like-minded individuals in every level of government. Out in Rocky View County, out in the provincial government, out in the federal government, we also need to be engaging with landowners who share this view. And we also need to hope that Rocky View County elects councillors who share this view as well. And we are not going to be able to get to these big conversations until we deal with all that other stuff that I've been talking about. Because it feels to me like all we've been doing is reacting to the pressures. And now we're caught in this trap of we're going to have to react to the issues that we have facing us for the next few years. But I want to get proactive on the future of Cochrane. Which brings me to my final point. We actually have an opportunity to do this right before us. And it's the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan. I mentioned it several slides ago, the SSRP. If you understand how municipal planning works and how regional planning works, at the very top of the pile is the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan. So that's where the province rules. This is what we're going to do in each of these individual areas, and it trumps everything. So if the province is going to say, we're going to have a protected park here, we're going to allow for major industrial expansion here, we're going to allow this city to get really big here, that all starts at these regional plan levels. But the province only updates them once every 10 years. And guess what? We have an opportunity to update it right now. And Cochrane actually almost missed the opportunity to participate. When the initial engagement on the consultation came out earlier this year, I learned through the grapevine that we did not even choose to participate in giving our feedback to the SSRP, which would be the mechanism by which we can actually have a serious conversation with the provincial government about this. And we did end up, because I caught it, we did end up getting a open letter together, which was unanimously supported by all of my colleagues. But the conversation is still looming. And it's important that I highlight this because I want the community to know that having a conversation about this is not out of the realm of the possible. We just need to get ahead of it. We need to do it. But there's an opportunity out there. So, if you share my concerns about all this stuff, if you support better government, slower growth, smarter financial planning, and more parks and green spaces, I urge you to please get out there and vote in the upcoming election. We took questions from the floor after this. Of course, you're not going to have the opportunity to do that on this video. I would encourage you to add your question in the comments below. This video is going to be posted on Facebook and YouTube, and I will try and keep up with all the questions as best I can. If you've made it this far, I sincerely appreciate your commitment. I hope you didn't find it too cumbersome or boring, but yeah, this might be the last you hear from me before the vote comes up, so please get out there and vote. My name is Morgan Nagel, and I'm running to be the mayor of Cochrane because I believe it's time for change.